Sitting out here struggling to get this in my car. Men are walking back and forth. No one is trying to help me.
But why should they? And why would they even want to? After all, women have been telling men over and over again to leave them alone. Women are independent. They don't need men. And now some are complaining when men are actually listening to them.
I love this
They
girl.
don't make real men anymore. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not all men, because there are good men out there.
That's a very good point. There are good men out there.
As a woman, like, you don't see men holding doors anymore. They don't help anymore. They rush and sit down on trains and buses before women and pregnant women and elderly are sitting down. It's just a hot mess out here. But
This really shouldn't come as a surprise.
Surprise,
After all,
surprise.
isn't this what some women wanted? What modern feminism was pushing for? For women to be treated as equals to men, right? No special treatment needed. Don't need to hold open a door. Why help out? Women can do everything themselves just as good as men can.
Or even better.
Now it seems some are complaining that they got exactly what they asked for.
You know what talking point I cannot stand?
I just can't wait to hear this one.
I can't stand it. Oh, well, you can't say fuck all men and then expect them to protect you, protect women, or
Oh, this argument.
you can't expect men to protect you without giving them some autonomy and control over your life.
Actually, in order to be protected by another person, that individual does have to relinquish some of their autonomy.
I absolutely can't expect those things.
Absolutely agreed. A person can absolutely expect that. But that's not a realistic expectation, especially when it starts out with this.
Fuck all men.
Because saying something like that is a very clear message to most men that one doesn't even want them around. Yet at the same time, one is expecting those same men to protect you. Now, how exactly are men supposed to navigate that field of contradictory statements and come out unscathed? Because one definitely seems to want it both ways.
How do you expect a man to protect what he has no authority over? Yes, I said authority. See, as a married woman, I recognize that my husband is the head and leader of this house, and what comes with being a leader is authority. I submit to him and allow him to have authority over me because I trust that he knows what's best for me. But right now, I bet y'all hear the word authority and think, oh my God, she's oppressed. Oh, quite the contrary, my dear. I don't have to deal with the dangers of the nightlife because when my husband says to be home at a certain time, oh honey, I am. He knows the dangers of the streets goes up 10 times more after dark. If he says to take off an outfit, I'm taking it off because he doesn't need other men lusting and catcalling over what belongs to his eyes and his eyes only.
There you have it. A traditional woman that in 2023, so many people ain't in agreement with that. Some want to say to each his own. Some try to say, is it going to be successful? She being controlled. She said it, I didn't.
This girl is actually not into this guy. He feels threatened by all males, so he immediately puts his arm around her, pulls her in. And if your girl really loves you, she's just gonna let go and be like completely smothered in your chest. But the body language doesn't match up, and then her verbal language doesn't match up next. Watch.
Cheat on her? Never.
Huh? Wait, what'd you ask?
Will you ever cheat on him?
Yeah, I would, but he wouldn't.
See? So she pushes him off, and then she humiliates him with the words. And this
Who has made you cry the most?
In case nobody's asked you this today, are you
Who
okay?
has the nicest
Are you
body?
really fine? I mean,
Who
you know
is
it's
the
okay
funniest?
to feel a little off sometimes. It's alright that you don't want to smile.
does your
you
mom
don't
like
need to
the most?
explain bad moments away. We all get them and get through them.
Who has
Don't
cheated
forget
on
that
you?
even the darkest clouds have the sun shining
Oh.
on the side.
Who was the biggest
You
liar?
will be fine. Eventually,
Jeez.
most likely, you'll feel the corners of your
What's
mouth
the best
naturally
kisser?
rise, and you'll know that it's real because everybody will be able to see it in your eyes. Until then,
Who do you
I
think
was just
loved
calling
you
to
the
check on
most?
you because I was thinking of you, and I wanted to make sure.
And the guy was sitting there. He didn't know what was going on. The ultimate simp.
All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into, how shifting gender roles are impacting expectations around help and chivalry. This is a conversation that's been bubbling up more and more.
Yeah.
Our source material for this deep dive is a single YouTube video for the Black Coffee Podcast.
Okay.
And, this show is a really popular platform for discussing, current events and social issues from a predominantly male perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what makes this particular episode titled "Men Are Refusing to Help Women"? They want to know why. So interesting is that instead of, like a straight debate, we have this all-male panel reacting to a viral video and then like dissecting the comments section.
Right.
And so it gives us this really raw, unfiltered look at how different people are interpreting this seemingly simple scenario.
Exactly. And that scenario is what really sets the stage for this whole discussion.
Yeah.
We see a woman struggling to get something into her car, and several men just walk by without offering assistance. The video itself doesn't reveal what she's trying to load, which I thought was interesting because it forces us to just focus on the bystander's reaction.
Exactly. Like it removes any potential judgments about whether the task was, worthy of assistance.
Right.
And instead shines a light on, those unspoken assumptions we make about gender roles and, who should be offering help.
Yeah, it really kind of like throws those assumptions into stark relief.
Totally. And the panel's initial reaction to the video is this mix of amusement and almost a sense of vindication.
Yeah.
And they keep repeating this phrase. Is this what you wanted, ladies?
Yeah.
Directed at women in general.
Oh, yeah.
Implying that, like, women's push for equality has backfired by discouraging men from being chivalrous.
It's like they're saying, you wanted equal rights, so now you get,
Yeah.
you get the consequences of that.
Which raises a really interesting question, right? Does striving for equality mean women have to relinquish any expectation of help, even in situations where they might genuinely need it?
Yeah.
Is that like the trade-off?
Right. And does respecting a woman's autonomy necessarily mean standing idly by when she's clearly struggling?
Yeah.
I mean, where do we draw the line between respecting boundaries and being indifferent?
Those are such good points.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have this strong reaction to the video, and then they start diving into the comments section.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting, because we see a wide range of perspectives.
Yeah.
Some viewers echo the panel's sentiments, right? Advocating for a return to those traditional gender roles where men are the providers and protectors, while others are championing those modern egalitarian relationships where help is offered and accepted based on need, not gender.
Right. It's this fascinating tug of war between, traditional values and
evolving expectations.
Exactly.
And to get the whole simp label.
Oh, yeah.
Which the panel and commenters use to deride men who are seen as overly attentive to women, particularly if it's perceived as a way to gain romantic favor.
Right. It's interesting because that term simp, which originated like in these online communities, really highlights these anxieties that I think some men feel about navigating this new landscape of gender dynamics.
Yeah.
They're caught between these ingrained societal expectations of masculinity and this fear of being perceived as weak or manipulative for showing care or offering assistance to a woman.
You know what strikes me is how quickly the conversation jumps from men should be helpful to but not too helpful.
Yeah.
Because then you're a simp.
Exactly.
It seems like there's this very narrow definition of acceptable male behavior. And any deviation from that can lead to ridicule and judgment.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
And it's interesting how this ties back to the panel's emphasis on male authority being necessary for protection.
Yes.
They even share an anecdote from a woman who describes her husband's control over her clothing and curfew
Oh, wow.
as a form of love and safety.
Okay.
That one made me pause. On the one hand, if both partners genuinely consent to that dynamic, who are we to judge?
Right.
But it does make you wonder how much of her acceptance stems from societal pressures and internalized beliefs about a woman's need for protection.
Exactly. It raises all these questions about like true autonomy and agency within a relationship.
Right.
Is it truly empowering if someone else is dictating your choices, even if they're framing it as being for your own good?
And I think this is where having those clear definitions is crucial.
Yeah.
When we talk about autonomy in this context, we're referring to a woman's ability to make independent choices and control her own life.
Right.
Agency is the power to act on those choices and exert control over her own destiny.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are important distinctions.
And it's not about saying one relationship model is inherently right or wrong,
Right.
but rather about acknowledging the potential for power imbalances and ensuring that both partners feel truly free and respected in their choices.
I think that's a really good point.
And that leads us to a bit of a tangent.
Okay.
But I think it's worth unpacking because it speaks to a broader point the panel makes.
Okay.
They bring up infidelity, specifically using Beyonce and Jay-Z as an example.
Okay, interesting choice.
And their argument seems to be that if women want independence, they shouldn't expect their partners to be faithful.
Oh, wow. So it's like they're implying there's this inherent conflict between female autonomy and male fidelity.
Right. It's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you think using a high-profile celebrity couple like that actually contributes to the discussion?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it just distract from the core issues?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, while it might make for entertaining commentary, I think it risks oversimplifying the complexities of both infidelity and women's pursuit of independence.
Yeah, because not every woman who seeks equality in a relationship is condoning infidelity.
Right.
And not every man feels threatened by a woman's independence.
Exactly.
It's not a zero-sum game.
No, it's not as simple as that.
And that's where the panel's grandma's secret anecdote comes in, which is basically this darkly humorous story about a grandmother with 8 kids, only 2 of whom were likely her husbands.
Oh, wow.
It's their way of saying that infidelity has always existed.
Right.
It's not some new phenomenon caused by women wanting equality.
Okay.
But does that normalize cheating?
Yeah.
Is that really the message we want to send?
It's a provocative point for sure.
Yeah.
It kind of raises the question, is the panel genuinely trying to offer like a nuanced historical perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they simply deflecting from those legitimate concerns about how changing gender dynamics might impact relationship expectations?
It's hard to say their intentions, but I think it highlights how this conversation can quickly veer into generalizations and assumptions about men and women's motivations.
Yeah, and that's precisely why it's so important to approach these discussions with like a critical eye and a willingness to challenge our own biases.
Absolutely, because the goal isn't to point fingers or place blame, but rather to understand the different perspectives at play and hopefully find a way to navigate these shifting dynamics with more empathy and understanding.
I think it's a great place to leave it for now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, like we're all trying to figure out the rules to a game, and the rules are like constantly changing.
Yeah.
And it's easy to feel like lost or frustrated.
Right.
You know,
totally in the process. And the panel even touches on this idea of men feeling like they're walking on eggshells, right? Constantly worried about saying or doing the wrong thing.
Right.
They suggest that this fear of being misconstrued or labeled as a simp might actually be preventing men from offering help, even when they genuinely want to.
It's a valid point.
Yeah.
If men are constantly second-guessing their intentions and worrying about the potential social repercussions, it's understandable that they might hesitate to act, even in situations where someone clearly needs assistance.
So are we saying that chivalry is dead?
Whoa.
That in this new era of gender equality, men should just avoid helping women altogether to avoid any potential misunderstandings?
Yeah.
Because that seems like a pretty sad outcome.
I don't think it's that simple.
Right.
It's not about abandoning chivalry altogether, but rather about redefining it.
Okay.
In a way that aligns with modern values of respect, autonomy, and consent.
So how do we do that? How do we strike that balance between being helpful and respectful without overstepping boundaries or falling back on outdated gender stereotypes?
I think it starts with communication.
Fair.
It's about being mindful of the situation, reading the other person's cues, and maybe even just asking, would you like some help with that? Instead of assuming.
Which can feel awkward, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're approaching a stranger.
Yeah.
It's like you don't want to come across as creepy or intrusive, but you also don't want to be indifferent to someone's struggles.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is, and that's why the panel's emphasis on positive male role models is so crucial.
Okay.
They argue that young men need to see examples of healthy masculinity, men who are confident in their own identities and capable of expressing care and empathy without feeling emasculated.
Because right now it seems like the dominant narrative is all about dominance and self-sufficiency. And any deviation from that is seen as a weakness.
Exactly. And that's where the simp label becomes so damaging.
Yeah.
It perpetuates this idea that men can only express kindness or generosity within the context of romantic pursuit, which undermines the possibility of genuine platonic care between genders.
It's like we've forgotten that men and women can just be nice to each other without it having to be some sort of calculated transaction.
Right. Can't we just hold a door open for someone to offer to help carry a heavy bag or simply lend a listening ear without it turning into this whole saga about gender roles and power dynamics?
Apparently not.
Apparently not.
But seriously, I think you hit on something really important there. The power of simple everyday acts of kindness.
Absolutely, because sometimes a small gesture can make a big difference in someone's day, and it doesn't require grand pronouncements of chivalry or elaborate displays of masculinity. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and treating each other with basic decency and respect.
Okay, but I have to push back a little here.
Okay.
The panel also brings up this idea that some women might play the damsel in distress card to manipulate men. They suggest that not all cries for help are genuine, and that men need to be wary of being taken advantage of.
That's an interesting point. It highlights the potential for cynicism and mistrust that can creep into these interactions, especially when men are bombarded with messages about women seeking special treatment or using their femininity to their advantage.
So how do we navigate that? How do we discern between genuine need and potential manipulation without resorting to suspicion and skepticism?
I think it comes down to trusting our instincts and being willing to err on the side of compassion.
Good.
Yes, there will always be people who exploit others' kindness, but that shouldn't prevent us from offering help when we see someone struggling.
Because the alternative is basically assuming the worst in people, which doesn't create a very supportive or trusting environment.
Exactly. And it reinforces this idea that men are constantly being tested or tricked, which only adds to the pressure and anxiety they already feel in these situations.
It's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
It is.
The more we buy into these narratives of manipulation and mistrust, the less likely we are to extend a helping hand, which only perpetuates the problem.
And it reinforces the very stereotypes that we're trying to move away from instead of focusing on potential ulterior motives.
Yeah.
Maybe we should focus on cultivating a culture of empathy and generosity where offering help is seen as a natural human response, not a strategic maneuver.
Right, because at the end of the day, we all need help sometimes.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be great if we could approach those situations with a bit more grace and a lot less suspicion?
I couldn't agree more. It's about remembering that we're all in this together, men and women alike, and sometimes a little bit of kindness can go a long way.
Okay, so we've talked about the panels, those initial reactions, explored those anxieties around the simp label, even touched on the tricky topic of infidelity. But ultimately, they circle back to that original video of the woman by the car.
Yeah.
And with what I found to be a rather surprising conclusion.
Oh, really? What's that?
Well, they assert that the woman likely could have gotten help if she had simply asked.
Oh, interesting.
Which, on a surface, it seems to place the onus on the woman to explicitly request assistance.
Right.
Even when she's visibly struggling.
Yeah, it seems like they're saying, hey, if you want help, just ask.
Right. But then that contradicts their earlier points about men respecting boundaries and not wanting to overstep.
Yeah.
So which is it?
Right.
Should men be proactively offering help, or are they supposed to wait for a verbal invitation?
It seems like they're trying to have it both ways, which I think reflects the genuine confusion many men feel about navigating these situations.
Yeah.
Like they want to be helpful, but they also fear being perceived as intrusive or disrespectful.
And, let's be real, approaching a woman alone by her car, even with the best intentions, could easily be misconstrued.
Oh, absolutely.
It's such a delicate balance between being chivalrous and being creepy. And I think that's what the panel was trying to get at, even if they didn't articulate it very well.
I think you're right. They're grappling with this idea that traditional forms of chivalry might not translate well into our modern context, where women are rightfully asserting their independence and autonomy.
So what's the takeaway here? Is chivalry dead? Do we need a completely new set of rules for how men and women interact in these everyday situations?
I don't think chivalry is dead, but I do think it needs a serious upgrade.
Okay.
It's not about abandoning those core values of kindness, respect, and consideration, but rather about expressing them in a way that feels authentic and empowering for both parties.
So instead of relying on these outdated scripts about how men are supposed to behave and how women are supposed to respond, maybe it's about approaching each situation with a bit more sensitivity and a willingness to communicate.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all answer. What might feel empowering to one woman could feel patronizing to another. It's about being mindful of those individual cues and preferences.
So instead of making assumptions, just ask simple as that.
It might sound simple, but I think that shift in mindset could make a world of difference. Instead of defaulting to these rigid gender roles and expectations, we can choose to engage with each other as individuals with respect and a genuine desire to connect.
And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of that old-fashioned chivalry can still find its place in the modern world as long as it's rooted in genuine kindness and mutual respect.
Because ultimately, isn't that what we all want? To feel seen, supported, and treated with dignity, regardless of our gender.
Absolutely. And I think this deep dive, as messy and contradictory as it was, has given us a lot to think about.
It certainly has. It's highlighted the complexities of navigating these evolving gender dynamics and reminded us that communication, empathy, and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions are key to building a more just and equitable world for everyone.
So for our listeners out there, here's something to ponder. Does chivalry require an invitation? Or can it be a spontaneous act of kindness? How can we as individuals navigate these tricky situations in a way that feels authentic, respectful, and maybe even a little bit brave?
Keep those questions in mind as you move through your day, and remember, a little bit of kindness goes a long way.